I have opened the document called Nervous from the exercise files. Let's convert this image to RGB because it's grayscale right now. Now that we have the ability to work with color, let's go to the foreground color swatch over here in the toolbox and pick a color. There are many ways for us to colorize this image. We could simply pick up the brush, change its blend mode, and start painting over our image. I'll undo some of the things I show you so we can look at a number of methods. Let me try using the brush again, but after changing its opacity to something lower than 100% and using a blend mode as well. Okay, let's look at another way. Let's go to the main menu and under Edit and Fill. Let's make sure foreground color is the selected option in this drop-down list. We can use blend modes within this dialog window as well, and let's use an opacity of 20%. Let's undo this. Because these operations are actually affecting my image layer, you can always create a duplicate copy of your original image layer, name it something like backup, so that you have your original handy if you decide to start something new and you've gone too far with the layer you worked on to undo within the history window. You can click on the eyeball to hide it. You can do the same thing in GIMP as well. Okay, now let's pick a different color and let's open the Image, Adjustments, and Hue Saturation. We can check the Colorize option, which will apply the foreground color we just picked. With the Hue slider, you can shift your color through a range of hues, and with saturation, you can make your color more intense or more subtle. Lightness affects the lightness of your image, as you can see here on the canvas. Keep an eye out for this preview checkbox. All of the dialog windows within Photoshop will allow you to have this selected in order to preview different settings you're exploring before you commit to them. In Photoshop, instead of using Hue Saturation adjustment from the main menu, try applying it as an adjustment layer from the Layers window. Another thing we can try for colorizing our image is the Gradient tool. It lives in the same spot as the Paint Bucket tool. Let's pick two different colors for these two swatches, the foreground and the background. Let's go to the control bar and select a blend mode, and let's make the opacity lower than 50%. With our image layer selected, let's click in the left area of the canvas and hold and drag to the right area of the canvas. There are more gradient types you can choose from this control bar, so experiment with them. I will undo this change. Now let's create a layer over our image layer, which we can paint with one solid color. I will pick the paint bucket from the toolbox, make sure I have the right layer selected and the color I want in the foreground swatch, and I'll click on the canvas. Now I can change the blend mode of this color layer and its opacity. With this method, we're not affecting our image layer while we experiment. We can also create a layer behind this one, which we can paint with one solid color, and we're going to use this in a little while. I will name it Background. I will pick the paint bucket from the toolbox, make sure I have the right layer selected and the color I want in the foreground swatch, and I'll click on the canvas. In GIMP, you can use the Bucket Fill tool in the same way we use the paint bucket in Photoshop. In GIMP, you can use the brush in the same way to colorize your image. To use Fill to apply color, create a new layer first, then go to the Edit menu and select Fill with foreground color. Then go to the Layers window and adjust the blend mode and opacity of your colored layer. You can merge these layers by going to the Contextual menu, Layers menu, Merge Visible Layers. In the dialog window, select Discard Invisible Layers and hit OK. What you will be left with then in the Layers window is one layer containing the imagery you created so far. Let's look at hue saturation within GIMP. Let's go to the main menu, Colors, Hue Saturation. Grab the slider for hue and move it around to change the coloration of your image. Similarly, you can adjust the saturation and lightness with these sliders. To use the gradient tool in GIMP, first set the foreground and background colors from these swatches in the toolbox, and then pick the gradient tool. You can adjust the blend mode, opacity, and make sure your gradient operates using the foreground to background. Then click on your canvas and drag from one end of the canvas to the other. If you look in your layers window, you will see that we affected the layer of our image. If you don't want to affect your original image layer, you can create a new transparent layer, apply your gradient on that, and then adjust the blend mode and opacity. If you ever need to move layers together, you can link them by clicking on one of them, pressing Command on the keyboard, and then clicking on the others you want to link to it. Once you have selected them so they are highlighted in the Layers window, click on the chain button in the bottom here. You can see a chain icon next to each of them. Now, if you pick the Move tool and click on any of these layers that are linked together, they will all move. You can also merge layers together by selecting the layers you want to merge by pressing down Command and clicking on them, then going to the contextual menu and choosing Merge Layers. Something else you can do once you're done with a project and you want to merge all of your layers into one without selecting any of them, you can go to the contextual menu and selecting Flatten Image. Just keep in mind that if you flatten your image, save, and close it, you will not be able to recover the layers you built it with. Flattening your image in GIMP works the same way. To link layers together in GIMP, select one of the layers, click on the small box next to its visibility eyeball, and a link symbol will appear. Now click on the corresponding boxes of the layers you want to link this layer to so that all of the link layers have the chain symbol showing. Now if you pick the Move tool, you will be able to move them all at the same time. To create text in Photoshop, you need to pick up the Type tool from the toolbox. To create a text box, click and drag within the canvas to mark the area of your text box. Once you let go, you will notice a couple of things. We have created our text box indicated by this dotted line and handles around it, which we can guess that are for adjusting this box. And we also have a new layer that was automatically created to hold our newly created text box and its contents. I will start typing to create text within this text box. If you can't see your text, it may be because your font size is too small, or if you have a white background and your type is set to be white, you will need to change the color of one or the other in order for your text to be visible. To make changes to the properties of your text, color, size, font, line spacing, and so on, you will need to do one of two things. You can highlight your text by clicking and dragging over all of your text, and once it's highlighted, you can use the control bar to change its properties. If you want to match the color of the text with color appearing elsewhere in your image, once you have gotten the color dialog window open, you can hover over with your mouse outside of this window, at which point your cursor will turn to a color picker, and click on the color you would like to choose. Within this mode, by highlighting a specific word, you can make changes just on that and not to all of your text in your text box. If you want to change all of the text contained in this layer in the same way, instead of highlighting the text, you can just as easily get out of this mode by selecting the Move tool. We can see now our text box boundaries are not visible and we can't edit what we type at the moment. Then let's head over to the Layers window to make sure our text layer is selected, and let's also make sure we have our Character window open. You can open it from Window, Character. This gives us the ability to change any setting that relates to our text. I will go ahead and change the color by picking on this swatch, and I will pick a different color from my image. I will pick a different font from this drop-down list, and I will adjust the size of the text here. We can also change the spacing between characters from this drop-down list. And as with any of the other settings, we can enter our own amount by clicking in the setting box and entering a number. To make all of my text uppercase, I can click on this shortcut here. Or I can go to the contextual menu of the character window and select all caps. You can spend more time in this window and under the contextual menu to explore the rest of the settings. To move my text within the canvas, make sure you have your Move tool selected in the toolbox and move your text layer. Now, if I want to edit my text, I will have to pick up the Type tool again and select my text in order to get into the text mode again. This may cause you a bit of pain until you get used to it because it's a bit of a touchy situation. If I pick the Type tool and click anywhere in the canvas, a new text layer will be created here in the Layers window, and my existing text box does not get activated for me to edit it. So I will click and drag this accidental layer into the trash can. Even if I click somewhere close to my existing text, I may have the same problem. The trick is to have your Type tool and click between characters you've already typed. Then your text box will get activated and you can make your edits. In GIMP, to add text, you pick the Text tool from the toolbox and click and drag to indicate your text area. You can type your text and then highlight it to adjust its settings from the settings bar that appears right above it. From the tool options over here, you can change the font of your text as well. Any changes you make on the tool options here relating to the size and color of your text will be used for the next text layer you create and not for your existing text layer. To adjust the boundaries of your text box, you can grab onto the edges or corners of your text box and drag them. To move your text box, you will need to pick up the Move tool and carefully select your text itself in order to move it. If you want to get back into your text box to make edits, you have to pick up the Text tool again and click within your text box. I will now paste some text I copied earlier so you can see how we can work with paragraphs. I will highlight all of the text in this box by pressing Command A on the keyboard to select all, delete on the keyboard, and I will paste with Command V. If I have more text than I can fit in this box, I can click and drag one of the handles of the text box to enlarge the text area. I will get out of the text mode by picking the Move tool so I can make changes to all of the text uniformly and without having to highlight it. I will need to make my text smaller, so I will go to the Character window, make adjustments to the font, the text size, and the line spacing. And I'll also adjust the color. For paragraph adjustments, we can go to the Paragraph window and change the alignment to left, center, or right, or we can make our block of text justify left, center, or right. If we want to change the layout of the text, we can go back to the text edit mode by picking up the Type tool and clicking within our text area. We can now click and drag on the handles of the text box to adjust how the text is laid out. In GIMP, to adjust the line spacing, you can adjust the setting here, and for spacing between characters, you can adjust this setting. You can work with paragraphs within the tool options of your text tool. You don't have to open a different window. You can adjust the alignment and justification from these buttons. I will hide the text I've created here so we can look at something else. Let's go to the Type tool and click and hold. We want to pick the horizontal Type Mask tool. With this selected, let's go to our Character window and set the size of our text. Now let's click on our canvas and start typing. The mode we're in right now looks similar to the Quick Mask mode. Red color is covering all of the canvas area except for our text. While we're in this mode, we can still adjust the position of our text by hovering outside the area of the typed text so that the cursor becomes the move tool symbol. After we commit to the text we have typed and exit this mode, it's too late to make changes using this tool. Okay, I think I'm happy with the text so far. I will pick a different tool to exit this mode. I usually just pick the move tool when I need to exit modes like this because it's the tool I need to use most commonly and it's the least destructive. Now the text we typed has become a selection. It's not a real text layer if you look at the layers window. What we can do now is inverse our selection and then hit delete on the keyboard. We now have image within our text. In GIMP, let's create a text layer that says nervous. With this layer selected, let's go to the contextual menu, layers menu, and alpha to selection. Now we see marching ants around our text. Let's hide the text layer and select the layer with our body image. Let's go to the main menu, select invert, and let's go to edit clear. The area we deleted got filled with our background color as it has been set in the background swatch. Now let's look at something called layer styles. If you double click on a layer off of the layer name, you will get a dialog window pop up called layer styles. With this, you can create effects that apply to your layer. So for my word nervous, I will add some drop shadow by checking this option on the left menu here. With any of these styles, once you select them, you have to click on their name in order to adjust their settings here on the right. So I will click on the drop shadow style, and with my preview selected so I can see what I'm doing to the image, I can see what each of these settings affects. So now I see I have a drop shadow applied to my text, but it's too much. I can lower the opacity of the drop shadow, the angle, its distance from the text, its spread, its size, and so on. You can play around with these to see how they operate. I will try to make this drop shadow very subtle, and I will click OK. Now we can see on the layer we affected there is an effects indication which we can deactivate by clicking on its eyeball as if it were a layer. In GIMP, you don't quite have layer styles as readily available unless you download and set up plugins. However, if you simply want to add a drop shadow to your text, for example, you can select your text layer, go to the main menu, under Filter, Light and Shadow, Drop Shadow. Make any adjustments you would like and click OK. If you add more layers of text and you want them to have the same layer styles as what you set up here, you can right-click on the image text layer, select Copy Layer Style, and then right-click on your other text layer and select Paste Layer Style. Let me go back in the history to before we created our image text. We have our text selection marching ants, but this time instead of cutting out the image, let's make a solid color layer and just cut out of that. This way we still have the full image underneath it, which we can move around with the move tool or even transform it with Command T.